First question I want to ask you is actually how is Travis doing today, nearly a week after that horrible tragedy at the Astroworld Festival?
You know what? He's devastated. He's not in any different condition than he was Saturday morning when he really realized the magnitude of what went on. I'm pretty sure he hasn't left his house since he got home, and he is devastated. The reports in the news are absolutely true. He's especially devastated because this was in his hometown. He has a lot of ties to Houston, a lot of love for Houston, and he's just really hurting right now because of the tragedy that ensued.
Well, understood, understood. Your statement earlier today that we received, you referred to, quote, multiple finger pointing, much of it by city officials who have sent inconsistent messages, your statement said. What finger pointing and inconsistency are you referring to specifically?
It's a shame that there's been so much finger pointing because I think we all need to just lean back a little bit and let the investigators investigate and figure out what actually happened here. So many people are pointing fingers at Travis and others without knowing really the facts. And we need to get the facts. We need to find out what this institutional breakdown was that happened, figure it out for the families, and figure it out so that it doesn't happen again. So, for instance, just a day after the mayor and the police chief, as I understand it, said that, you know what, if the plug had been pulled earlier on this show, there could have been rioting, there could have been a lot of things. So it wasn't prudent to stop the show earlier. Just a day later, the police chief came out and said, Travis Scott is the guy that should have pulled the plug, didn't pull the plug, he's at fault here. I don't understand why there has to be finger pointing. I do understand everybody's stressed about this. It's a horrible tragedy and people are reacting differently, but we don't want to point fingers. We just want to find out what happened.
In that question, do you feel at this point that those city officials are unfairly trying to put that blame onto Travis?
Well, I think anyone that is pointing at Travis without knowing any of the facts is, I think, acting unfairly. I don't know if you've ever been on a stage, on any kind of stage, but especially this type of stage that is huge, that you have pyrotechnics all around you, flash pots going off, so there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of light. It's the middle of the night. You have ear monitors in your ear with music blasting and your own voice blasting in your head. You can't see things that are going on out there. He certainly couldn't see the magnitude of what was happening. When he saw some specific things, and I think one was from a riser, so he was much higher up than he was the rest of the show. When he saw a specific thing, somebody down, he said, "Security, get out there." And he stopped while people got out there to try to help whoever was down. And that happened, I think, 2 or 3 times during the show. So certainly when Travis knew something was going on, he would stop and make sure that somebody was helped. But as far as knowing the magnitude, knowing that something was happening that could ultimately lead to the death of now 9 people, certainly he didn't know any of that. And nobody told him to stop the show until when ultimately right before the show ended. And it was not supposed to end as early as it did. Once they told Travis stop the show, he'd stopped it immediately.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. HPD Police Chief Troy Fenner, he held a press conference yesterday, and one of the things he specifically talked about, he wanted to address what had been described as a special relationship with Travis, and he said he wanted to clarify that, said that they actually had only met 2 times ever. What was Travis's response to the chief's clarification, and why do you think he felt the need to make that particular clarification?
I think he's trying to separate himself, and in pointing fingers, doesn't want to point fingers at himself. I haven't talked to Travis specifically about that, and I don't really know the nature of their relationship. I know Travis knows several of the city officials. He's grown up here in Houston, and has some very heavy ties to Houston. And so I know he feels those ties, and it weighs heavy on him, particularly with respect to this.
Yeah, you described him earlier as being devastated. Has said that since Saturday morning. Does he feels devastated? Does he in any way feel any responsibility for what happened since his name is associated with it, since he was in basically the headliner in charge?
I think anyone that is the headliner, that is up on that stage, that brings people together, brings 50,000 people together, is going to be devastated when this happens, and you're going to feel like, was there anything I could have done different? And I'm sure he's asking himself those questions. I don't know if there's anything that he could have done differently. There's probably a lot of things that a lot of people could have done differently, or this wouldn't have broken down. But that's something that we're all going to try to figure out when the investigation is concluded and we figure out where it really did break down. But as far as Travis knows, as far as Travis is concerned, he is greatly sympathetic to the families, has wanted to reach out to the families. In fact, started an email address so that people could contact him, because he doesn't feel like he needs to. He wants to reach out to the families, but he doesn't want to impose on the families at this point. He wants them to do it on their time, on their terms. So he started this email address, and I can give that out in a minute, but he wants the families that want to contact him to contact his team, and members of his team will be reaching out to the families that actually use the email.
Understood. Okay. Yes. Yeah. If you could share that with me, but before we wrap up, I would appreciate it.
Sure, it's 8.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, no, I can wait.
Okay. Okay. Now we do know that Travis has been arrested at least once for inciting violence in a crowd, and Chief Fenner said just shortly before the performance on Friday night, he went and met with Travis to express some concerns over some social media posts. And when it comes to those particular issues and that history, is there any feeling of responsibility or any thought that maybe we could have done something differently?
You know what? I think that, first of all, I've heard many different versions of the meeting between the police chief and Travis. I think if the police chief really had any true concerns, he should have addressed those with security. I don't think he would have allowed the concert to take place, or at least without having his concerns addressed specifically. He certainly didn't bring up any specific concerns with Travis. But the second part of your question, Travis, I think, has grown as an artist over the years, and he did some things that he's not proud of when he was younger. And I think that at that point, he really didn't know the magnitude of his power up on stage, and if he says something, people are going to jump. And so I think that now he seems to realize that. He seems to realize the power he has up there, and I think he's a little more deliberate about how much he gets the audience going. Of course, he has to get the audience going, and any performer has to. But he realizes there are limits. I don't think he really overstepped those limits during this show. I've seen the video of the show. But I think he understands more now. I think he's a more mature artist and has seen how things that he's done, things that he's said can lead to bad results.
At last count, there were at least 72 lawsuits in all, and 7 of them listed Travis specifically. What is your plan legally? Are you planning on going fully to court and fighting these, or could you see some type of settlement? What's your strategy at this point?
It's far too early at this point. Travis's attitude right now is to do a little bit of healing to help the families heal, to get to the bottom of it, both for family catharsis, family healing, and to make sure that it never happens again. That's his primary concern. That's really his only concern right now. We as lawyers are going to have to defend him in these lawsuits, and we'll do that accordingly, and we'll respond when the time comes to appropriately respond. But right now, all Travis is thinking about is the families, what happened, and how we can make sure it never happens.
And my last question for you, it kind of concerns families, but then also other people who were there as well. There's been discussion about clauses if they received a refund. Would you all waive any clause that prevents a concert goer from suing Live Nation or Travis if they accept a refund?
You know what that I don't even know what clauses you're talking about, so I can't really address that. I've not been told of anything. My understanding was that refunds were given. That, of course, that's not up to Travis anyway, and I think much of what you're asking is really not up to Travis in any event. But that's something down the road that we can certainly look at.
Is that something you think down the road you would support if someone said, okay, hey, I did receive a refund, but I should have the right to pursue legal action?
Oh, I don't think there's anything that's preventing them from doing it.
Gotcha.
So yes, I mean, we would certainly respect their right. We will respond to the lawsuits, as I said, accordingly at the appropriate time. But I'm not sure there's anything, and I certainly haven't heard of anything precluding anyone from filing lawsuits. And as you said, there are actually more that you mentioned than I'm aware of. So as you said, there are plenty of people out there that have sued already and apparently didn't feel constrained by any clauses or anything like that. So we'll respond to them at the appropriate time. Right now, I think our priority has to be figuring out what went wrong rather than pointing fingers, as many people are doing at this point.